based on some requests from you guys, and just as in recognition, not only that our job is challenging, but that the situations that we are in, the whole ACA context is already extremely challenging, given that we are in a very, as they say during the navigator training, in a very fluid environment, and that is the fluidity concept that they started with. I think it's absolutely true. So given that, and how we have to still respond to our clients who want responses and coverage, and who wants the system to work effectively with reason, it makes our situations even more challenging. So we invited Kinsey McManus to talk to us about how to handle this. Kinsey is a social worker, and she has a background in crisis prevention and intervention in the workplace. And she's going to give us a wonderful training today. So the training is going to be recorded, so if you want to share it with your colleagues, as always, it is going to be available on the portal. So let's start it.
All right. Thank you, Nora. So this is Kinsey. I put my contact information on the front end just so that if you have any additional questions after the webinar, or you want to troubleshoot about something related, that you have some way to contact me directly here at CSS. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how to identify and counsel, and I use the term counsel very loosely, different types of applicants who present challenging situations. We're also going to talk about the tools that will assist you with these applicants to the best of your ability, and most importantly, improve self-care and reduce the potential for burnout. So just as a general background, because the marketplace is brand new and the ACA, has really changed health insurance as we know it in the U.S., there are so many new challenges and new opportunities that we're faced with right now. We really appreciate the feedback we've already received from you, because we're developing a script to help you set appropriate expectations at the beginning of your enrollment appointments. And then we're also putting together a sheet of talking points regarding the most frequently asked questions for post-enrollment, so that we're not spending a lot of time, trying to assist individuals that we've already helped enroll when there are other appropriate places to get that information. So we want to make sure that we're supporting you both on the front and back end of these experiences. So in general, when we're preparing an applicant for their enrollment, it's really helpful for us to set a lot of expectations on the front end. It helps us in the long term with our boundary setting and how we're able to continue to maintain kind of a healthy and appropriate relationship during the application process. So first and foremost, always start your enrollment appointments with setting a time limit. If it's an hour long, that's it, and so being very firm about that. Also, presenting it on the front end means when you remind them towards the end of the appointment, it's not a surprise, right? And especially if you're finding that an enrollment is going to clearly go beyond the time limit you've set, I'd recommend stopping the appointment about 10 minutes beforehand to say, let's check in with where we're at. Let's see what you can do on your own. Let me set up goals for you, so that if we need to get back together again, that you've accomplished something, so that we can meet very briefly on the second time. Or over the phone, exactly. Also, briefly explain the enrollment process. Let them know that they may not make a decision today. That's fine. More research might be required before they can select a plan. The biggest point is reinforcing what your role is as a navigator, and the clearer we are up front, the easier it is to maintain those boundaries later. So my primary job is to help you just enroll in a plan. I'm not affiliated with an insurance company. I might be funded by the state, but I'm not a state employee, and I do not have the ability to push applicants' information through the system. I think that's cleared up front, because that expectation seems to keep cycling through in the feedback we're getting. Prepare for possible technical issues with the marketplace. As we know, the system is new. It's still being perfected, and to let people know that there may be issues during the process, and to kind of expect them so it's not so frustrating when it happens. Check to see if they've started the process already, and of course, on the front end, asking if they have any questions or concerns before you even dive in. So now I'm going to kind of switch focus and talk a little bit about the specific challenging situations that we're confronted by. The first part is more, what are the challenges we all experience as navigators, but what are the unique challenging situations that our applicants may present? So we're going to talk today specifically about individuals who are assertive or aggressive, individuals who become angry or abusive, talkers, and then someone that may present with potential mental health concerns. So in general, we bring a lot of skills to the table that help us work effectively with our applicants. And something that I want to point out as we're processing through this is that there's going to be information I talk about today that you're going to think to yourself, like, obviously, I have this down. I know this. This is something I do well. I want you to kind of take note of that just as much as, oh, this is something new, or this is a new strategy or way that I can work with this type of person or this population or this specific challenging situation. So it's just as important to be in touch with the skills that we have as with the areas that we may need some improvement in. There's not pulling up my. So they have like little, sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty. Bear with me for a second. I think these are just the three that have that function. So sorry about that. We're just learning, different styles of PowerPoint. So skills that really help us to be effective when we're working with applicants. Maybe this is my social work background. I work in mental health, but empathy is always, I think, the #1 skill. Really being able to consider how the other person may be feeling. Because the ACA and because the marketplace are so new, and this is such a new way for our, for the public to really think about health insurance and their healthcare needs and the information they need to provide, this really can be a very overwhelming experience for them. And so being able to tap into that just helps us in general come from a different space when we engage with the public. Active listening mostly just works with us to make sure that we're really understanding each other. So we're, sometimes, and we'll talk about where this skill is particularly helpful, but reflecting back the information we're hearing to ensure to our applicants that they're really being heard by us. Being able to assess the situation, I think sometimes we have this tendency, particularly when other people become angry or agitated or frustrated, to want to just jump to an answer. But sometimes we need to take a step back and just think, what's really happening here? What can I really do to effectively move forward? And there isn't an urgency to have to provide an answer. Sometimes we just really need to assess what's happening. Patience, I think you've all probably been continuing to develop your sense of patience through this process. But again, I think we all recognize how important that can be in this process. Management of my own emotions, I'm going to talk a lot about that today, of both, putting myself in someone else's emotional space as well as touching back in with my own emotions. This really helps in the long run with self-care practices, but also helps us to be mindful about how we're engaging with the other person. The other piece is developing a sense of trust. So, we're asking the applicants to share a lot of personal information with us, and particularly in American culture, things that we traditionally don't talk to other people about. Healthcare needs, my finances, that is something we are not comfortable talking with each other about. And then the other piece that, the Affordable Care Act has a political line to it. And so, we don't talk about money in politics in our culture. So keep in mind that these are two very sensitive areas that come up as we're providing our navigational services. So again, I just want you to kind of touch base. What other things are you using that really help you to be effective when you're working with applicants? And for each of us, we have varying skill sets. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about what makes us different and unique is that we all come to the table with different skill sets. So thinking about what things do I already do, or what things do I already have working for me that help me work with the public. So I just want to note, because I didn't mention it at the beginning, if you have any questions, if you can just write them in and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. But feel free to kind of write them in live so that, you know, you don't kind of forget about it and then we don't answer it. Of course, if you have questions that you think of at the end and the webinar is over, feel free to email me or you can call me on my phone. And there are going to be parts of this webinar that become interactive. I'll warn you when that happens, but then if you'd like to contribute, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you to jump in. Okay. So I also think about navigational services as really customer service. And so I just put together some ground rules that we use in the field of customer service to help things move smoothly. First and foremost, mentally prepare yourself before an enrollment appointment. Tap into your skills, check in with how you're feeling. Am I a little tired? That's good to know before I go in. Am I feeling super stressed out? Maybe I need to bring it down a notch for myself before I go into an enrollment. Then the most important rule is to not take these things personally. Applicants may experience a high level of distress due to their insurance issues. They may have a lot of other life stressors going on. You know, this is the trick when we work with the public. We never know what's happening in their lives, and you're kind of meeting the person for the first time and diving into some really sensitive information. You know, just keep in mind that they've asked you for help, but you're not the problem. And that's kind of a good mantra to keep running. Also reminding yourself that you're good at helping other people. You know, at this point, many of you have been able to successfully help a lot of people enroll in insurance plans. So touching back in with that is very helpful. If you have a particularly stressful or challenging enrollment appointment, please take a break in between, especially if you have one back-to-back. Again, like I said, nothing is really that much of a crisis. Your next appointment will wait, and they'll appreciate the fact that you return and you're ready to work with them in a calmer space. If you need to go, take 5 minutes, walk around the block, talk to a colleague, you know, just sit at your desk and do some deep breathing, do it, you know, because at the end of the day, it makes that next enrollment that much better, and it makes you that much saner, to be honest. Feeling more balanced, and it's really about balancing the needs of our clients and balancing the needs of ourselves. I can't stress again how important it is to use stress management techniques. You know what works for you. Things that work for me are like taking a deep breath, practicing positive self-talk or affirmations. Think about, I use empathy a lot. How does this make someone else feel? If I was in this situation, how would I feel? That helps reduce a lot of my stress around the situation. Shoulder and neck rolls, doing a little stretch, again, taking a walk, you know, really using and incorporating stress management on a daily basis, not just on a I'm really stressed out, I need it now basis. At the end of the day, we're working with the public. So they're going to be challenging situations, and to assume that they're not going to happen is setting yourself up for failure. You know, again, this isn't personal. The challenging situations hopefully become far and few between when they do exist, but people are going to take their negative experiences out on you, whether or not it's the right thing to do, right? And of course, always consider what you could do differently next time. You know, none of us are perfect. There's always going to be a chance to improve. Each person and each enrollment is different, as you know. And sometimes the person is really upset about something legitimate, and that's when we have that moment of, do we need to report this to the state? Do we need to really start, you know, communicating about this issue as a whole to see who else is experiencing it? Or, you know what, maybe there was something I personally could have done differently. Maybe I should have ended the meeting sooner. We're going to talk about that, that if things are starting to get very unproductive, sometimes it's worthwhile to just stop, and that's okay. And so sometimes it's asking yourself, like, wow, that really kind of got out of control there at the end. Was there a point that I should have ended it sooner? Or was there something that I said that triggered the person? So, you know, really doing some reflection when we have a particularly difficult situation with a client. Okay. So now we're going to really we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the different types of challenging situations. So first and foremost, we have the assertive or aggressive applicants. You know, this team I really like to think of is like if you get put in a room with a president or a CEO who's really used to saying jump and everyone jumps, right? They tend to be a little bit pushy, they're impatient, they're rushed, they may be cold to you or loud, they want to throw their authority around, they're name droppers. You know, this team, at the end of the day, we all handle our frustrating situations differently. Most of us experience sometimes a sense of powerlessness when we are confronted with a major system like healthcare, right? So how we handle this powerlessness is really about our personal history, our culture, potential disability, our current situation or mood, and our self-concept. So when I think about assertive or aggressive clients, it also makes me think about this difference between like communicating with New Yorkers versus Southern Californians. You know, you really approach them differently. And it's not to say that either one is better or worse than the other, it's just really different. And so our assertive or aggressive applicant might fall closer to the New Yorker side, right? But again, this isn't personal, this may just be the way that this person functions in life, and for the most part, it works for them. So, strategies. First and foremost, stay calm. You know, this team can really kind of undermine your sense of ability, or they may very directly do that. The next step is to really raise your assertiveness level. So you're always going to keep it below theirs, but this team really responds well when you show that you do have confidence yourself and that you're really here to help. So if your voice is soft, you do want to raise it. Be direct and to the point, really stick to business, cut the small talk, and kind of have this running mantra of like, I can't control others, but I can control myself. This team wants to know that you're really going to help them, right? And so this kind of using like a little chit-chat or getting to know someone, like this person is all business. This may not be an effective style. You may not need to build trust in that way. It's really about what is this person asking, what do they really need to get done, and let me not get offended by their lack of rapport. You know, and show them that you're willing to take charge in this situation. You want to reinforce your role as a helper and reassure them that you have the expertise to handle this situation. This team is also going to be a group that's likely to demand to speak with your supervisor or someone above you. Again, you know, you keep that assertiveness. So something like, you know what, I'm really the one that's here to help you. I assure you that I'm able to do this. Is there something specific that I'm not doing, or is there something that I can do to make the experience better? You know, this person, there's no need to kind of say like, oh yes, let me go get my supervisor, unless you start feeling uncomfortable with them. But for the most part, they're really asking you, what they're saying in between the lines is, I don't think you can really help me. And so by saying like, you know what, you're kind of right, let me get my supervisor, that kind of feeds into that feeling when at the end of the day, you can help them. You know what you're doing. You have the expertise. And they're just unsure of what the process is like. So also if they spend a lot of time talking about how important they are or how important their job is or why they need to rush back to what's going on in their life, you know what, reinforce their ego. It's fine. Bring the focus back to what you're doing to assist them. Like, sounds like your job is really important or valuable or takes a lot of skill. I'm really impressed. I'm looking forward to helping you. What can we do today? You know, so, you know, it's kind of like, oh, it doesn't feel great, but at the same time, like, it just smooths things along. They want recognition from you. Just give it to them. It's going to work for both of you in the long run of the end goal of getting them enrolled. And the final piece, because I think that this group can be particularly, for me at least, I find them to be particularly challenging, is touching back in with that empathy. So, you know, remembering that their attitude might come from a few different places. You know, maybe this is just the way they're used to doing business. It could be a part of their culture, or it results from a very serious confidence issue. Whatever the problem is, we don't have to diagnose that so much as just remember that, you know what, it's okay. They can feel this way. I'm going to assure them that I'm going to take care of business. We're going to stay on topic, and I'm going to let them know that we're going to process through this together. So for this next example, for this one I'm going to kind of walk you through what we're looking for, but moving forward for the other styles of challenging situations, I'm going to open these up for you as a group to start processing. But I'm going to walk you through this first example so you see kind of what we're looking for here. So Ms. J meets with you to enroll in a plan. And from the start of the conversation, she appears really impatient. She's tapping her nails on the table. She's talking over you when you ask questions. She's sighing heavily when you're typing information into the database. She's becoming increasingly frustrated with the amount of time it's taking to get through the enrollment process. She repeatedly explains to you how busy she is and how she has very little time for this. You know, also one of these clients that tends to interrupt your productive questions to remind you of unproductive things, like she's very busy, she doesn't have a lot of time. So for this, you know, and we'll ask these same 5 questions. First and foremost, how are you feeling? For me, in this situation, I'm probably starting to get really frustrated. You know, of course I want to help her quickly and efficiently as possible. I think that's the goal for all of us, right, when we're helping someone enroll. So it's particularly frustrating when I feel like the client may be stalling the appointment because they're frustrated at how long it's taking. But then my next step is to ask myself, how do I think Ms. J is feeling? And this is what's going to help me start managing not only my own emotions, but starting to think about what type of potentially challenging situation am I currently in. So I'm probably going to have a moment of, you know what, Ms. J is someone who's assertive or aggressive. Okay. She's worried that, and she's being very clear with you, she's worried that this is taking too long. So what strategies can I use now to help her? Well, I know that I'm working with someone who's an assertive or, you know, is an assertive or aggressive stance. So I'm going to reflect on her emotions. You know, what is she really worried about here? I'm going to reinforce my role as a helper, reinforce that we have the same shared goal. You know, I do really want us to get this done effectively as possible. Maybe you haven't been clear on the timing, so I want to remind her that, you know, this is where we're at in the process. Based on how we've been moving, this is how long I anticipate it to continue going. You know, is this really the right time for her to continue with me? I would like us to get this done today, but, you know, I'm going to let her choose if she has the time to commit to it. You know, and that's a component also from the social work perspective of letting our clients make their own decisions. And so if she's really realizing, you know what, I didn't plan for this amount of time, I don't have the time to do this right now, that's fine. But let me tell you where we're at, what I think you can do in the meantime. Maybe we can just follow up with a phone call next. Or what can I get done so that my next appointment with Ms. J is just a phone call, right? And then, you know, really asking myself at this point, do I really think that I'm able to help Ms. J with the enrollment? I would say for this particular situation, my answer is yes. You know, I think I can absolutely help her with this, but that's her choice at this point. You know, if it's taking too long, then it's her decision whether or not she really wants to stick it out with me. And then, like I said before, you know, our next step is really, you know, using the strategies noted while making sure that I'm managing my emotions. The more frustrated that I get, the less helpful I'll be with Ms. J. You know, and furthermore, I may be more likely to make mistakes if I'm really frustrated, and I think that for me, particularly, this type of client does really heighten my sense of frustration and irritation. And so with a client like this, I would be continuously checking in on my feelings to make sure that I'm, you know, staying on top of it and not letting that come through. Because if I start showing my frustration, it's going to cycle hers, it's going to uptick her level of frustration as well. Okay, so like I said, now we're going to talk about angry or abusive applicants, and we kind of get done with this little chapter on them. I'm going to open it up to our scenario to talk through those questions as a group. So angry or abusive applicants. You know, anger is a natural response to perceived threats. We occasionally assist individuals who react in anger for a variety of reasons. Fear, anxiety, frustration, disappointment. sadness. It could also be substance abuse and a mental health disability. Sometimes people are going to be angry because of the enrollment process, right? And sometimes it has nothing to do with what we're there to do together at all. Despite obnoxious behavior, loud shouting, screeching voices, or clenched fists, pointing fingers, red faces, and all, most angry people have a sad message. Most likely they're trying to tell you that they're feeling hurt, ignored, disrespected, unappreciated, or uncared for. But what's most important when we're thinking about anger, and bear with me, is that anger is associated with cognitive distortion. And that is a fancy word for saying that, it changes how we think. The thing is that when, if you think back to the last time you were super angry at someone or about something, we tend not to think clearly. We have this fight or flight response that kicks in when we're angry because your body is responding to a threat. The most important thing to keep in mind is that when we're angry, our body kicks all of our blood flow to your body instead of your brain. So your brain is not getting enough blood flow, it's not getting enough oxygen, and it's not thinking clearly. There are physiological barriers to clear thinking during anger. We also have these verbal and motor behaviors like clenched fists, slamming the telephone down on the receiver. We use profanity, strong words, accusatory, sarcasm. Again, adrenaline is pumping in your system, your body is reacting, and we have these patterns of physical arousal. You have that heart rate, the sweating, the increased blood pressure. Here's the deal. If someone's particularly angry, you're not going to be able to reason with them. They're not a rational thinker. Anger has completely hijacked their brain and their ability to think. Your job in the immediate isn't to, try and solve the problem so much as just try and get the anger down a little bit. There's a specific type of cognitive distortion associated with anger, and it's this perception of blameworthiness. Usually something or someone is at fault for making me feel angry. There's a righteousness affiliated with anger, and so it's very difficult in the moment for us to talk to someone angry because they're not thinking clearly. So there is an important differentiation between angry behaviors and abusive behaviors. Angry behaviors, harsh tone or strong words, they might try and dominate or control the situation, they're not really listening, they have a loud voice. Fine, we can deal with angry behaviors. The biggest thing is usually you're just going to be quiet for a while and let them bring it down on their own. Abusive behaviors, on the other hand, is a different story. Persistent swearing, attacking words, threats specifically, and accusations, those are things we're not going to deal with. If you feel at risk or in danger at any point during an enrollment, you should immediately follow your crisis response plan. Each of us will define this differently, and that's okay. The most important piece is that you feel comfortable and safe. I'm going to talk about ensuring physical safety also in these scenarios because that's something that I think is particularly important that we need to be aware of. So some strategies for handling applicants who become angry or abusive. Here's the deal. These quote-unquote de-escalation techniques, they're not natural. Once someone is angry and in our presence, our fight or flight response gets triggered, right? So not only do we have someone who's not thinking clearly, who's totally hijacked by their own body, our body starts hijacking our own responses. The trick is that we have to appear centered and calm. I'm not saying that on the inside you feel super calm. You're probably not. But on the outside, you want to have a very soft voice. You want to keep it fairly even. You want to use fairly simplified language. And continuously have this running script of this is not about me. Anger is a normal human emotion. Let's not worry about who's right or wrong. And there's really no specific verbal content except trying to be calm and centered yourself that brings the level of anger down to a safer place. And the other piece is that I think in this situation, often in our enrollments, oftentimes I think about this particularly with tax credits or what people are going to pay or what their options are. Separate yourself out from the system a little bit. It's okay to represent the external controls as institutional rather than personal. I don't make the decisions about your eligibility for tax credits, These are determined by the government. You know, and in a situation like this where someone's angry and they have the potential to move into abusive, which I'm on high alert if someone's starting to get angry, I'm thinking about that, it's fine. You can kind of blame the government a little bit on this one. It's best to separate yourself out. You don't want to be targeted as the point of anger because, again, that's that sense of blameworthiness. Someone or something is the reason why I'm angry. Let's make sure that we're back on, I'm worried about my financial situation, or it's the government, not Kinsey is the reason I'm angry. You know, I don't want that situation to arise for myself. So, you know, if they're yelling, this is a great technique. You just lower the volume of your voice. We are natural imitators, and so it's a great trick. I used to work long-term locked inpatient psychiatric, and it worked every time. You know, I'm not saying maybe whisper, but bring it pretty far down so the person kind of has to be focused to hear you. Ask yourself, this is the empathy piece, you know, if I was dealing with this situation, how would I feel? Empathize their feelings, but not their inappropriate behaviors, okay? So I can understand feeling very frustrated that you didn't get the level of, you know, tax credit that you anticipated in the marketplace, but I'm also not going to condone that you just, you know, threw my coffee mug on the floor. So give the person a short period to vent. Let them talk for a little while. At the end of the day, it's hard to maintain anger over a long period of time because it takes so much energy. Let them run out of their energy a little bit. Definitely don't become defensive. Even if the comments or insults are directed at you, they're not about you. Don't defend yourself or anyone from these insults or curses. Be very respectful even when you're setting limits. And respond selectively. No matter how they present a question to you, if they're asking for information, like what paperwork do you need from me, you can answer that kind of question. But do not answer abusive questions like, are you an idiot? Just let that sit and let that hang. That's where you can use silence as a tool when dealing with an angry person. So some questions that you can ask. You know, it sounds like this is very upsetting for you. Can you explain X, Y, or Z so that I can see how I might be able to help you? You might want to ask, how do you think I can be of help? Or help me understand what you're saying. You know, would you like to continue our discussion calmly, or would you prefer to stop now and talk another time? If the level of anger persists, you might want to just take control of the situation and say, you know what, this doesn't seem like the good time for us to talk as you're really upset. We would really like to help you, but we can only do so once you're calm. We don't want to miss any important information. Would you like to set up another appointment? Would you like to talk on the phone? You may want to talk on the phone to this person, right? Trust your instincts. If you assess or feel that de-escalation is not working, stop. You know, seek help and follow your location's crisis response plan. At the end of the day, your safety is the most important component of an enrollment process. So some things to keep in mind to maintain our physical safety: know your crisis response procedures. If you don't have one in place, this is an important time to talk about it. You should really have some type of crisis response plan at your location. Having a team that knows what to expect or what to do if it seems like someone may become physically assaultive or is overly confrontational, you know, it's just comforting to know that you've got the team to back you up. And always make sure that there's someone near you in your office or your meeting place. For me personally, I'm wary of after-hours appointments. If there's not a lot of people around, then you really need to have some type of plan in place of how you can contact someone quickly. If you're a coworker and you hear someone getting loud or angry, walk by that person's office and make eye contact with your coworker. We're all a team here. You know, it's not, ooh, I don't want to get involved with that. You need to let someone know, like, hey, I'm just making eye contact with you to make sure that you're okay. You know, you may have nonverbal signals with your staff, your coworkers, to say, whoop, this is a problem. Can you contact someone? Or we need an intervention. Never turn your back on someone who is actively angry at you. If possible, make sure that there's a heavy piece of furniture between you and the person. Do not stand full front to the person. This can be perceived as confrontational. You want to turn a little bit to the side. Think about boxers. there's a reason that they stand on the side. First off, protect your vital organs. This may seem extreme, but I used to teach physical intervention as well. So you're going to stand to the side not only because it protects you physically, it also gives you an opportunity to turn and run away from the person, but also you appear smaller and less threatening. Don't maintain eye contact. Definitely don't point or shake your finger at people. Don't smile. I know that sometimes when we get nervous, we have a tendency to smile. Be very careful about that, because what it says indirectly is, I think this situation is funnier, I'm not taking it seriously. And typically when we're angry, we're demanding someone take this seriously, right? Don't touch the person. Give them extra personal space. That's good for you and the other person. Keep your hands out of your pockets. Always be at the same eye level. Again, allow extra physical space, and be thinking, how am I going to escape? Now, these are obviously preparation for extreme scenarios, but these are important things for you to know, because once or twice is enough for us to say, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing there, right? So I don't anticipate that you'll feel that physically vulnerable, but it's important to have a plan in place and prepare for the what if. Okay. So I'm going to talk us through this scenario, but then I'm going to open it up to everyone to kind of talk through how we might handle this situation now that we've kind of I've talked extensively about what we do with angry or abusive clients. So Mr. L is meeting with you to enroll in a plan. Initially, the meeting is going well, and Mr. L is excited to find out how much insurance will cost him. However, once you enter his information, you discover that based on his income, he's only eligible for a small APTC. He becomes extremely angry and begins to curse. He starts yelling about Obamacare and how it's keeping the working man down. He's visibly shaking. He has clenched fists, and his face is getting redder by the second. So if you can raise your hand to kind of respond, that would be great. But the first question is, how do you feel about this? Don't all jump out now.
Anyone? It's something you deal with almost every day, most of us, right?
I think this is a pretty common occurrence. No hands raising. All right. We're a little shy. That's okay. So I'll say how I would be feeling. I am feeling threatened. Bottom line, I'm starting to get a little afraid. I'm also thinking, oh, this is a common experience. This is really frustrating. Why does this keep happening? But mostly I'm thinking, wow, Mr. L really flipped on me there. I thought things were going well, and now it's really going in the wrong direction. So the next question is, how do you think Mr. L is feeling? Anyone? Oh, Diane.
So I bet Mr. L is feeling pretty frustrated, right? Perhaps he's been uninsured for many years. You know, perhaps he was unsure of what Obamacare would do for him. We got him in for an appointment. Things were going well. Now he sounds disappointed. You know, it could be that he has some pretty serious medical needs and needs care right away and is thinking, like, how am I actually going to afford this? I really need treatment. So there's, you know, frustration, disappointment, anger.
Yeah, and I think that these are very common feelings. Thank you. I think these are very common feelings that that are the undercurrent of anger. Threat, fear, these things really drive anger. But also now that I'm starting to process how Mr. L's really feeling, it makes me think, you know what, I'm not saying that the way that he's treating me right now is okay, but I can kind of get where this is coming from. Okay, well maybe a little bit of empathy is going to help me here. So what strategies can I use to really help Mr. L at this point? Oh, Nora?
So I don't know from the social work perspective, but something that has helped me when clients are upset because they have to pay something for the coverage is that I give them what the cost of coverage was before the Obamacare, right? And I also show like how much, let's say that they have to pay $100. So I say, this is similar to what you pay for a cell phone, for your cell phone, right? So making that comparison sometimes has like lower the anxiety. That's from the perspective of more like the enrollment, as an enroller.
And what I have done in the past is compare the expected cost that the individual will have to pay, the premium cost, with what insurance used to cost on the individual market before the exchange, just to kind of bring it back down to, yes, I understand that you're saying you still can't afford this, but think about it in terms of what it used to cost before Obamacare, before the exchanges were established, before you could get a tax credit to apply towards that premium. So just kind of, with empathy, also giving a client a sense of the actual facts in terms of the cost.
So I think that those are very helpful tools after we've de-escalated Mr. L a little bit. Here's the thing. If he's shaking, he's got clenched fists, and his face is getting redder, he's probably not hearing me right now. Okay? And I think that that's information that gets you back on track to having a successful enrollment. My first tip is probably managing that anger a little bit. I might let him just rant for a little while, and that probably was already a given in both Diane and Nora's responses of like, we probably sit there quiet for a minute. And you're like, okay, Obamacare, yep, it's awful, okay, just let you talk it through, right? And saying, I can see, I can really appreciate why this is so upsetting. This is really, must be a surprise for you. I start reflecting back on his feelings. And I might hit the target and I might not, but like that also lets him start hearing, I'm hearing the feeling behind it. Wow, you didn't expect this. So once he hears that, in a way, I'm on his side. Okay, but here, once he gets a little more calm, you say, I can totally appreciate that this sounds like way too much money. And then I'll kick into let's make some comparisons about the cell phone bill, which I think is really great. I haven't thought about that one before. Or let's talk about what it used to cost before we had the marketplace. I think we as navigators really I think we really forget that for many people who haven't had insurance for a long time, that they have no idea the real cost. And so it's helpful to use that once Mr. L is feeling a little more calm, once we've got his, the anger isn't hijacking his brain anymore, and he's a little more in some rational thinking. Angry people it's like negotiating for hostages. I think you just have to bring it down to a reasonable level before we can start the negotiation. We got to get everyone calm before we can really get at kind of the nitty-gritty and the meat and potatoes of the enrollment process. I think that, it also gives you a little bit of time to start thinking, can I really assist Mr. L with this enrollment? I mean, if I don't help him manage his anger, then this is going to spiral out of control quickly. And so there are clearly things that you've all been doing that help keep this anger down, because I think that this is a very common reaction that people have when they find out how much they need to pay for health insurance. And then really thinking through how I can project calm and institute my de-escalation techniques. I may want to separate myself out a little bit from the marketplace or from the government or from Obamacare. I can see how this would be really frustrating. And then I'm also in the back of my mind thinking about the crisis response plan. I'm going to do my best to try and get Mr. L calm, but I really don't know what's happening in his life. There could, for all I know, his wife recently left him. Maybe one of his children is really, are really sick. You just don't really know what's also happened. Or he's at a really tough commute to meet with you. There's some things that we are completely out of our control that have nothing to do with what we do that create this sense of anger. Okay. So now we're going to talk about talkers. And I'm particularly sensitive about it because I feel like I've been talking a lot. So talkers, some of our applicants are lonely and isolated. They may find the enrollment appointment is a great way to connect with other people. Some people, like I, have the gift of gab. Either way, it's really important for your stress level to recognize the talker and get to the purpose of the meeting. Time is a valuable commodity, and we want to make sure that we're able to help as many people as we can. While a little bit of small talk really goes a long way with building trust with the client, and helps the applicant feel at ease, we really want to get to the conversation, more importantly, the enrollment, right? But they can be tricky. So first and foremost, again, it's kind of this script we talked about at the beginning of the webinar that we're going to send around. This is particularly helpful when we're setting boundaries with talkers. Right off the bat, we're letting people know this is the time that we have to spend together. Here's what we're going to talk about. This group, you just feel comfortable interrupting them. You might want to use the applicant's name to get their attention, and then when he or she pauses, get your point across. Or just jump in and say, hey, listen, I really need to ask you, or let me interrupt you for a second. That's really important information, but I've got some questions I need to ask you. Or I think we really need to focus on, or can we get back to, it would really help me to know more about. We really want to keep this team on target, and they love to get off topic. So when the applicant asks a question, answer the question and then tag your own question in right at the end. Can you tell me about, or while we're on the subject, or this may sound unrelated, but use closed questions. This is a strategy that we use in therapy for talkers specifically. Questions where the person can only respond with one-word answers. How many medications do you currently take? I'm not going to ask what medications do you take, or tell me about your medication use. How many medications do you take? What's your current monthly premium? Really try and strategize with this team to ask very pointed, direct, simple response questions. Because the appointment will only last an hour, you should let that applicant know when you have 10 minutes left. I think with this group, especially if you know you're not going to be anywhere near done, this should be considered at 10 minutes left the end of your appointment. You're going to use those last 10 minutes to figure out those next steps. Do they need to do research? What was the information you needed that they didn't have with them? Did the process trigger a need for more information or paperwork? Are they having a major change in their income this year, and so now we have to add documentation? Or is there a second, is a second appointment appropriate? That's the judgment call that you'll all feel comfortable making and have already been making, but you really want to use that last 10 minutes more as planning. And I think it helps save you and also reminds them that you're going to hold them to time limits, so if you have to meet with them again, they're held to that, and they can expect that. All right, so the talker, we're going to do the example again and see if we're warming up to the idea of all talking together. So Ms. M needs you to enroll in a new plan through the marketplace. While she seems very knowledgeable about her options, she tends to overshare with every question that you ask. For example, when you ask for her household size, she launched into a story about her recent divorce and where all of her adult children are living, none of whom live with her. At first you try to be polite and you let her speak, but it's already been 30 minutes and you're only 5% done with the application. So first and foremost, I'm throwing it out to the group. Feel free to raise your hand and jump in. How do you feel when you're in this type of enrollment? Diane?
I feel frustrated because I only have an hour to an hour and a half for this person, and it's not useful for me to get her entire life story.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think this group is particularly frustrating, and it's hard because very often this is a well-intentioned group. They tend to be really kind and engaging, and we have a hard time setting limits with them. But how do you think Ms. M is feeling? Okay, we're not super interactive today. All right.
So we got a response to the question for him.
Oh.
From Brian, Ms. M is feeling like all her recent life problems and frustrations are focused on this moment.
Yeah.
And we have a hand raised as well.
Oh.
Because Sandra, go ahead.
Hi. Well, I think, to look at the positive side of it, obviously she's pretty comfortable because she's sharing a lot of information, which is helpful. So you have that going at least.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And maybe she's feeling a little lonely. Sounds like she's got a lot going on in her life. And I think that this is why this group is particularly challenging, because we appreciate that they're upfront in sharing information that really helps us in the long run. But also, it's usually a group that's got a lot happening in their lives that are upsetting or frustrating or, really, really upsetting to us to hear. This woman's going through a divorce. Her kids aren't living with her. You can really empathize with her. So what strategies would we use to help her?
Well,
Diane?
empathy is one, like you just said. You can understand where she's coming from and why she might need someone to talk to, right? Or have a lot of things on her plate that she wants to share with you. But in these types of cases, usually what I try to do is bring the person back to what's important, right? So say, that must be really difficult, or I'm sorry to hear that, but, now we're up to this page in the application, right? Or now we're on the screen that's asking for whatever information.
Unfortunately, this is the group you have to interrupt. You hate to do it. It's really hard to do. You want to give them the time, but you've got an hour. And at the end of the day, the goal is to help them get enrolled. So I'm going to interrupt her and say, I'm sorry that, I'm going to reflect some empathy. Wow, it sounds like a lot's going on for you. We need to get back on topic. Or I'm going to just keep kind of continuing to remind her of our time limit and reinforce that maybe this is the strategy we use with this type of person of, I really have limited time. I don't know that I'm going to even be able to meet with you again in person. We might have to do something very briefly over the phone. And I'm here to help you to the best that I can. I want to make sure that we get through as much as possible because that's what I'm here to do, and I'm really here to help you.
And I think it's also useful to say, if this is the case, right, that, there's an enrollment behind you. I don't want to get too backed up so that I'll have to make somebody wait, or I won't have enough time to enroll the next person.
Yeah.
People sometimes will, hurry it along or be understanding and get to the point if they know that, like, their talkativeness is going to affect someone else, right?
That's great. Yeah, that's a great trick as well. Even if you don't have anyone next.
Right.
You can say
absolutely.
They don't know that, right? And it's okay, because at the end of the day, we don't have 4 hours to do an enrollment. It's just not feasible. So really reinforce the time limit, give them an update on your progress. I think especially if I note at 30 minutes, we're only 5% done, I'm going to say that. Wow, gee, Ms. M, we're only 5% through this. We've used half our time. So how can we kind of stay on track? And really reinforce the limit. I'm just dropping things. So the next kind of chapter that we're going to talk about are possible mental health concerns. 1 in 4 adults may be affected by a mental illness at some point in their lives. I've added a link to the National Institute of Mental Health. If you're not super familiar with mental health, here's the deal. You're not doing any diagnosis, but it might be, if you're particularly interested or you work with a population that seems to be presenting with some serious mental health concerns, it's not bad to have an idea of what's kind of associated with different types of diagnoses. Individuals with a mental illness have been consistently shut out of the system or denied access to proper mental health care. They're a highly, highly stigmatized and marginalized group. Their disability may make it more difficult for them to understand information, take independent action, or effectively cope with stressful situations. Sometimes their disability lends them to provide you with misinformation, or they may seem hesitant to provide you with the information needed to assist them with their concerns. The most important piece of this is that you're not a mental health professional, and no one is asking you to be. Diagnosis is not necessary to be helpful. It's also, you're not their friend. You're not their counselor. You're not their family member, and it's important to reinforce for both yourself and for this person what your role is in your relationship with them. So things that really work well in general: respond with respect and empathy. Always treat the individual as credible. Assume that they're a good reporter of their experience. Imagine and keep in mind that they've probably gotten the runaround elsewhere. Dealing with bureaucracies is very, very frustrating. And always indicate verbally or non-verbally that what happens to the applicant does matter to you. Asking yourself, what are the limits in considering your role? You're not a therapist, you're not a friend, you're not an intensive case manager. Epithets, slurs, stereotyping, threatening, intimidating, or hostile acts, in person or on the phone or an email, are not acceptable. So there are types of challenges that can be associated with mental illness: paranoia, boundary pushing, delusional and disorganized thinking, and then threatening harm to self or others. So with paranoia, it's not uncommon for applicants to be hesitant to provide, their personal information. The mental health population, on top of potentially a paranoia associated with their illness, also just have a lot of reasons to distrust the system. So we really want to make sure that we set the scene for privacy. We're very thorough about explaining confidentiality, explaining why things are important for you to know, offering examples, offering to help them find answers, encouraging and reinforcing, getting them talking about the things that they know. And with this group, you're going to use what we call open-ended questions. So tell me about something. Tell me a story. How can I ask you for additional information? Or please read the form you received from your insurance company. I know that that's something a little more common for us with the Consumer Assistance Program, but if they have documentation that they received from the marketplace and they're not sure, have them just read it specifically to you. Helping an applicant who may be experiencing paranoia. So we've got Mrs. F. She comes into the appointment and appears nervous. She's sitting far away from you. She's avoiding eye contact. These should be immediate triggers for me to think, this person may not be super trustful of me. When you start to ask her exploratory information, she accuses you of being a spy with the government and that you're trying to steal her personal information. So I added a little bit of an extra flavor to this one because paranoia can also come with some delusional thinking. And so that may be a legit situation that we need to handle. So first and foremost, you're threatened of being a spy with the government. How are you feeling in that scenario? So I'll go with this one. So, I'm a little nervous. I'm like, okay. I think one of the things that can be the most concerning when we deal with someone who may be experiencing a mental health concern is that now their behavior may be questionable. Oh, we're not totally in touch with reality. But you know what? I also have a lot of experience working with individuals who are suffering from thought disorders, so I'm thinking, okay, you know what? She seems a little nervous. This really, maybe her paranoia is just stemming from she's not really sure what's going on here, who I am, and why I'm asking such detailed personal information. But I will say that I am a little bit on high alert with this. Being called a spy sounds both paranoid and is outside of reality-based thinking. But immediately I'm also thinking, well, what's Mrs. F feeling? Because sometimes those statements can just be a reflection of emotion. So she's, I'm thinking she's probably really nervous or worried about sharing information. So my strategies are really going to be this kind of reinforcing of confidentiality, and remind, like, of course I'm not trying to steal your personal information. Remind her kind of why she's there. I'm helping you enroll in the marketplace. If you really don't feel comfortable sharing your personal information, again, we give her this choice. If you're really unsure of what my role is, I'm going to explain it to you. But if you don't trust me or believe me, then maybe you shouldn't be providing your personal information to me. And that's okay. If someone's not totally reality-based thinking, they need to feel comfortable sharing information, and this person may not get to that point. Or they might say, oh, sometimes I struggle with how I understand things. you're right. I know why I'm here, and you've tested them back into reality. So really setting the stage for privacy, assuring her you're not a spy, explaining the process, and offering to answer any questions or concerns before you move along, and asking her if she really does want to do the enrollment process. She may not, and that's okay. And I think that this is, again, a reminder that there are just some people that are going to come in to enroll that we may just not be able to help, and that's all right. This may be a bad day for Mrs. F. Maybe she hasn't had regular access to her medication, or today's just been a particularly frustrating day. So your next steps are really filling out where her level is. Obviously, it's a delusional thought that I'm a spy, so I'm not going to be able to really wholeheartedly convince her otherwise unless she convinces herself. So it's her choice whether or not she'd like to provide that information. And I think when you give her the choice, that also creates a sense of safety. So boundary pushing. Personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that we create to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave around us. But the thing is that it's our job to reinforce our boundaries and to respond when someone steps outside of those limits. If they're built on a mix of beliefs, opinions, attitudes, past experiences, and social learning. Certain mental illnesses are associated with interpersonal difficulties, particularly mood and personality disorders. Understanding and respecting boundaries can be something that an individual really struggles with, and when it comes to personal boundaries, some people just don't get it. So some types of boundary pushing to keep in mind would be over-disclosure of information. Not necessarily the talker, although talkers can be a little bit of boundary pushers, but really like personal, deep, or like private information, requesting your personal information, giving you a guilt trip, particularly around you not being able to help them enough, and then confrontational communication is a part of boundary pushing. So the easiest way to set boundaries is to start with them. This is why we're really driving home this idea of having a script that you use at the beginning of your enrollment session so that it's very clear what the expected outcomes of the work you're doing together, what your role is, what's their role, what are you available to do, how much time do you have to spend, and are there any challenges that they already think may happen. We really need to be consistent. Once you set a boundary, you need to keep it. Here's the deal, especially with talkers is a great example. If I say we've got an hour and then I let you stay in our appointment for 2 hours and we've only made it 50% through the enrollment, this person is going to assume that the next time they talk to you, they're going to have all the time in the world, right? So it's not being cruel. It's not being mean. At the end of the day, your time is limited. We are really here to help as many people as we can within a reasonable amount of time. And it's okay to tell them that and to say no. You can always set boundaries later if you need to, but at that point, you really have to explain why you're setting them. Because this doesn't seem to be working. Or, you know what, I'm dedicated to assisting you, but I have other applicants that I need to help. I'm willing to answer your calls during X time, or can we speak on X day? I will only speak with you once a day about this issue. I know that some of the navigators have stated that they've had some enrollees that continuously call them throughout the day, and continue to kind of push the boundaries in that way as well. This is boundary pushing. This is something that, of course there's a lot going on. Of course we want to help them to the best of our ability, but at the same time, it has to be kept within reason. There are a lot of people that we're also trying to help. So tools to handle specific types of boundary pushing. If someone is asking you for personal information, like how much do you get paid? You've got a couple of options, and it's a little bit about feeling out the person. Humor is a great way to handle this. So if someone asks me how much I get paid, usually I say something along the lines of like, half of what I'm worth, and I make it easy, and that's kind of how I first set my boundary. I'm not going to disclose information about myself, but the first time you ask me something personal, I might use humor, I might deflect it a little bit, I might not directly say, to shut it down. Because again, it's that respecting the idea that I'm asking you for a lot of personal information, and then when you ask me a small piece of my personal information and I shut it down very quickly, that may crumble some of the trust we have. But you can also be direct and just say, listen, I never discuss money or politics, period. Done. Now, it might set a little chill into the room, but you've made it very clear. Guilt trips. You never help me. You're not making me a priority. I need you to call me every day. Don't you care? You know, what are they trying to guilt you into doing first? And then tell them that you understand why it's important to you to do this. But set boundaries. This is a style of asking for help that's not healthy or helpful. You know, it may be helpful to provide a non-manipulative way to ask that same question. And finally, set boundaries and negotiate how you will assist them with their request. You know, maintain respect. Of course, helping you is important to me. Here's what I'm able to do, or here's what sounds very important that you're trying to get done. Is that clear? Is that, and we clarify, and then you say, in the future, you know, here's what when I'm available, when I can help you, or what I can help you with. And it may be, in the future, at this point, here's who you really need to contact. I'm not the right contact for this. And that's okay. So helping someone who's boundary pushing. Ms. K meets you for an enrollment. She starts to become particularly friendly and says, you seem like a really nice person. I really appreciate you helping me with this. Do you live in the city? At first, you might politely answer her questions without providing much detail, but as the enrollment continues, she begins to physically move closer to you. She's asking you if you're single. You know, things seem to be moving in an inappropriate direction. So I don't know how often this happens, but it's a good example of a boundary pushing. So first and foremost, how are you feeling at this point?
Grossed out.
Maybe a little violated? Uncomfortable? Oh, I think boundary pushers particularly are great at making us feel awful inside, in whatever way that they're pushing our boundaries. In this one, I mean, this is sexual harassment. We're moving in that direction, right? But, you know, again, I'm going to use my empathy. I need to think about, how is Ms. K feeling? Well, maybe she thinks she's made a love connection, you know? Who knew? She was coming in for insurance, and she found the love of her life at the same time. So maybe she's interested in me in a romantic way. So strategies that I can use to kind of help her. I would be direct with her about this. You know, I'm not comfortable answering that question. Set the boundary and reinforce what your role is. You know, remind her that you're here to do business. She's pushing it personal, and you're not comfortable. And I think in that situation, it's important to just be honest about your feelings and your sense in this situation. As long as she's able to abide by your boundary setting, you're going to be able to help her with the enrollment. That may be enough for her to realize, like, oops, okay, feelings aren't mutual. I was trying to test out the waters. I'm going to back off. You know, so just continue to set that boundary. You may want to physically move away from her as well. And if she continues to push the boundaries, I'm going to be honest with how she's making me feel. But at the same time, you know, if she's not able to respect my space, I'm going to finish, you know, I may say, you know what, I'm feeling very uncomfortable at this point. It seems, you know, I would like to help you with this enrollment process, but at this point I think it may be best for you to either complete it on your own if that's where we're at in the process, or you need to meet with a different navigator. I'm feeling very uncomfortable. You know, we certainly want to help you with this, but I'm not the right person clearly to do this job. And that's okay also. And then, of course, give your fellow navigator the heads up about Ms. K potential boundary pushing. It could just be that she really likes what you have to offer, and she may not feel that way about someone else. But she could also be a consistent boundary pusher, and we, you know, none of us should be sexually harassed in our job. Okay. So delusional and disorganized thinking. Hallucinations are when a person's senses, so sees, hears, feels, smells, or tastes things that do not exist. Delusions are exaggerated or distorted thoughts and perceptions of self and others, or unrealistic belief, inability, knowledge, or ideas. Like in our initial, discussion in the mental health population with thinking that I'm a spy as their navigator, or that people are after them, or that they're royalty. And then disorganized thought can just kind of include nonsensical associations and disorganized speech. Like, the problem is insects. My brother used to collect insects. He's a man, 5 foot 10 inches. 10. 10's my favorite number. I like to dance, draw, and watch TV. Whoa. We're all over the place. Here's the deal. Delusions and hallucinations are frightening. So if you're kind of sitting with someone who seems to not be super reality-based thinking, speak slowly and calmly and quietly, this is a trigger for me that we're probably not finishing the enrollment process. You want to use simple, concrete language. The rule is kind of less than 5 words with 2 syllables or less. Address them by name. Immediate goal is to focus on reality. If delusions are just bizarre beliefs that they don't interfere with the appointment, you just have to keep going. So like if the person says they're King James, but then they give you permission to use the information on their government-issued identification, you just keep going with the enrollment. You can keep going. I mean, they're somewhere in there that they've connected to reality enough, or they're willing to play the game because they know with the government that's how they have to do it, and that's how they've navigated the system. It's okay. Just because someone isn't totally in touch with the reality does not mean that they're a danger in any way, shape, or form, or that they can't really continue to engage in, appropriate behaviors. The trick is riding alongside the delusion. I'm not ever going to recommend that you agree with it directly, but you also don't want to directly refute it. Delusions are falsely held beliefs that they believe are true. In their world, this is real. So I might say something like, I believe what you're telling me is as you see it. If the delusions are paranoid, the person may misinterpret your words and actions and express ordinary things in his or her environment as a threat, and so I would be a little more cautious. So the person that thinks that I'm a spy, I'm going to be a lot more cautious about than the person that tells me that they're King James and I can just use their New York issued ID. Those are 2 different scenarios. Okay. So if the individual is having a hard time staying on topic, or they're making loose associations, like that statement I had, like, insects are bad, my brother works with insects, and it's like jumping all over the place, you might want to ask them if there's anyone that assists them with making their healthcare decisions. More often than not, they probably have someone they trust. So you may have to end the meeting quickly and offer to reschedule once they have that person to assist them with the enrollment process. So you might want to say something like, it seems like you're having a difficult time answering my questions or staying focused. I really appreciate your patience to this point, but this is a really long process and we have a lot more questions to answer. Is there someone that assists you with your healthcare decisions? If they say no, you might want to ask them if there's someone that they would trust to help them with their health decisions. I'd recommend that they come back at another time with this person. Really with someone that's experiencing delusional thinking, disorganized thinking, hallucinations, they're really not in touch with reality, this is someone that it may not be the right time for us to help them with enrollment, but they may benefit from having like a healthcare proxy come with them. So when we're thinking about assisting someone who's experienced disorganized thinking, so an example of this is like you're meeting with Ms. G to help her enroll in a health plan. A good deal of her application is already completed, so your main role is to help her with selecting a Medicaid plan. You explain the process and what's important to consider when selecting a plan, and she says, okay. You ask her if there are doctors that she uses regularly, but she just stares at you and says, okay. You try to ask the question in a different way, but again she says, okay. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, okay.
He doesn't get it.
She has no idea what I'm saying to her right now. But somehow, here's some clues. Like somehow she's gotten a lot of this done. So I'm thinking that either Ms. G's having a real bad day, or someone has helped her. And so I think in this scenario specifically, we immediately jump to, I'm not going to be able to help Ms. G today. Like, we're not in that space. It's time to just end it now. I might even be a little frustrated with myself that I spent so much time explaining something to her and didn't pick up kind of right away that she wasn't ready for this. But that's when you really go to, is there someone that helps you with your healthcare decisions? You know, I think that this may be something you want to do with that person, and that's fine. You know, especially for someone who does suffer from a severe and persistent mental illness, they usually have family members that are also friends that are very involved and supportive with helping them with their care. Oftentimes we need advocates to assist us through the process, and so, you know, it's really about letting them touch base with that person. And it's okay that you're not going to be able to do it today, and then having that person come in with them. So the final piece I really want to touch on is someone who's threatening harm to self or others. Again, this is something that should be very rare, but I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't talk to you about this. So what is threat of self-harm? It's any comment that indicates the person is planning to commit suicide or otherwise harm themselves, or that they're planning to hurt or kill another person. You know, it's very difficult to determine a person's intent, so the standard practice is we take it seriously. Do not leave the person alone. Call 911 or your local emergency number right away. You know, if you think you can do so safely, take the person to the nearest hospital emergency room yourself. I mean, that's if you can. I would say call 911, get professionals involved immediately. Try to find out if they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs or may have taken an overdose. And then, of course, get your supervisor looped in right away. Again, just as with your crisis response plan, there should be something about individuals who threaten self-harm as a component of that crisis response plan. The most important thing is that you need to make sure that you keep eyes on this person at all times. If we really think that they're going to be a harm to themselves or others, you should not be leaving them alone. And if that means that you just say, listen, I need to stop. I'm a little concerned about your behavior or what you've said to me. I want to make sure that you're safe. I'm going to call my boss, or I'm going to call, so that you don't necessarily have to be the one calling 911 with the person there in front of you. They may flee. So, you know, you do, and that's okay. If they run, you know, don't tackle them. That's not what we're doing here. But you might want to notify your supervisor in some way. If you can send an email that you know would be responded urgently to, so that someone can call 911 immediately so that they get the help that they need. I've added some mental health resources. There are tons of crisis hotlines. There's stuff all over the state and nationally to help with suicide prevention and just in general with crisis intervention. So the most important thing is to just keep practicing. What we're going to do is send out some scenarios either later today or tomorrow so that you can start looking over and thinking about, if you haven't already had a lot of ideas coming up of, you know, past enrollments, you know, what kind of situation is this? How would you feel? Really processing through what the other person is feeling, what strategies to use. You know, do you think you're going to be able to help them complete the enrollment, and what are your next steps? And the final component I want to talk about is self-care, which I'll touch on very briefly so we have some time for questions. You know, it's essential to our well-being and to our lives that we play and enjoy life. Every single day, do something that makes your heart sing. I love this quote. Maybe that's the social worker in me. Maybe that's too touchy-feely for you, but that's okay. I'm comfortable taking it there. So really the point of this for me is you should be engaging in stress management practices every day. This is not an emergency response system. Every day you need to be thinking about where your stress level is and what you can do for yourself to manage that. Because lives are stressful, and at the end of the day, if we let it get out of control, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. It's characterized by negative feelings, including hopelessness, disillusion, and helplessness. Burnout can be caused by high expectations or unrealistic goals. So self-care can help prevent burnout. During your shift, always, 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 always take a break after a challenging appointment. In fact, take breaks when you need them. Maybe your supervisor don't feel great about that, but taking a 2-minute break is fine. taking a 5-minute break. You know, at the end of the day, we're much more productive when we've taken time for ourselves. Take advantage of regular Navigator Network meetings to discuss concerns and really debrief with your fellow navigators. No one understands what this experience is like better than the other people doing the same job. Outside of the office, you know, first off, being aware of the warning signs of stress. Feeling anxious, irritable, or depressed, loss of interest in work, problem sleeping, fatigue, concentration difficulties, muscle tensions, headaches is another key indicator, social withdrawal. How we counter stress. First and foremost, get moving. Regular exercise is a really powerful stress reducer. Make food choices that keep you going. Get enough sleep. Create a balanced schedule. Don't overcommit yourself. It's okay to say no. Plan regular breaks. Connect with others. Laugh each day. Get strength from your spiritual beliefs. You know, and regularly engage in your favorite relaxation activities. We all have our own little special list of things that we do that make us feel good. So, you know, really tap into those and make it mindful and be present about it. This is me taking 5 minutes to relax, not I'm running out for a cigarette for 5 minutes. It's let me go take 5 minutes to myself and be present that I am doing this for me. Okay. So that's the end of the formal session, but I wanted to leave a few minutes open to any questions that you have. Feel free to either raise your hand or if you want to just type the question in, anything that's pressing or brought up by this training.
Or if you maybe want to give an example of a difficult client or difficult situation you've had and want to get some feedback from Kinsey on that situation.
Or if after the webinar they want to share something in writing, like they can email Kinsey and
yes.
And we try to give our recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So my email is, just to remind you, my email and my phone number are actually on the first slide of the presentation so that you have my contact information. You know, no question is really too big or too small. If it's just, hey, I'm not sure I did this right, or hey, would you have done it differently, or hey, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I'm more than happy to be a source of information.
Yep, so if you have any questions about specific difficult clients or strategies that we've discussed or Kinsey has discussed in the training, you can email her. We're also going to send around some examples of role plays that Kinsey has worked on for you to look through and see how the response in a real what the response would be in a real situation. And we're working on a couple of things that may be useful not only for handling difficult clients, but for keeping your appointments on task and accomplishing your appointment, accomplishing your enrollment during the allotted time you have for appointments. We have a lot of people expressing concern about post-enrollment problems that clients are having. So we are going to send out, hopefully by this time next week, a model script, a model introduction script that navigators could use to kind of try to set boundaries in the beginning of the appointment, a resource list for navigators which answers common questions and gives information and resources and referrals for some kind of post-enrollment issues that clients are having, so that we can refer clients to either do it yourself or seek out resources in other places. We're also working on a handout for network clients that explains and answers some common questions and gives some definitions to common terms so that they can sit while they're waiting and take a look at it, and that may help to get the appointment times down a little bit and really kind of focus your energy on getting the enrollment done when you're sitting there in the appointment.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I want to thank you all for attending, and please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns.
And this will be posted?
Yes, so it's going to be posted. Next week you'll have access to it. So thank you all, and talk to you next week.